Welcome to the Equipped Disciple channel. My name is Rick McClatchy. I will be your host. We are here to be and to make disciples of Jesus, and we do that through daily devos, through Sunday sermons, and through other discipleship resources. We are here to equip you to be an equipped disciple. All right, welcome into another day of your daily devos. I'm Pastor Rick, and we're in Genesis chapter 13 today. Abram's return from Egypt and a little fight with with Lot, his nephew. So we're going to see how this plays out today. We're going to start in verse 1. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that friendly stuff. Your friendly YouTube neighbor over here, Rick, would love it if you would share it with a friend, like and comment and subscribe, all that good stuff. That'd be great. So here we go, verse 1. Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev, he, his wife, and all he had, and Lot with him. Abram was very rich in livestock, silver, and gold. So Abram had it going on. He had a lot of money. He had a lot of livestock, like just all the things. All the things were working. They were all working. And he went by stages from the Negev to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had formerly been. So now he's back where he started. And it's interesting in the Bible when you see the comment or the phrasing, he went down to Egypt. It's like almost like a literary indicator that the person is going the wrong direction. So even though there was a famine and it seemed like going to Egypt made a lot of sense, it was probably honestly, the wrong path, the wrong way to go. Now, we don't really have the what if, magical power where we can be like, well, what if he had stayed, and what would have happened then? We don't have that ability. So we kind of just have to take it for what it is and be amazed at the fact that God saw fit to bless his life, even though he never consulted the Lord about it. He never like checked in and was like, hey, is this a good idea? He just went off and did his own thing and made his own plan. But God still saw fit to bless him because God is that gracious. He is better to us than we could possibly deserve. It's amazing. And so now you can see that this chapter starts off with Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev. So it's like he's coming back. He's coming back up to where he's supposed to be after he went down to Egypt. And then the whole comment there in verse 3, he went by stages from the Negev to Bethel or Bethel. Bethel is kind of probably a better way to say it, just because Bet is like for house and El is the Lord. So it's the house of the Lord is what Bethel means, or Bethel. And so he's back in the land of Canaan now, between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had formerly been, to the site where he had built the altar. So he goes all the way back to the altar. He called on the name of the Lord there. Now Lot, who was traveling with Abram, also had flocks, herds, and tents. And so he returned back to the place where he had built an altar in the past. So it's like Abram's kind of having this come to Jesus moment, though he doesn't know the name of Jesus yet, right? Like he knows God. So it's like he fled down to Egypt because of the famine. He told him that Sarai was his sister and, all that stuff. And Sarai gets taken away from him. And, who knows how mad she was about that. How long she didn't talk to him, like she kind of threw a fit or whatever. Who knows? The Bible doesn't tell us. Probably best. And so he gets kind of booted out of Egypt because they didn't feel like he was very nice because he didn't tell them the truth. So they're like, get on out of here. So he goes up by stages, and by stages, it's because he had all these livestock and stuff. So he needed to keep them alive, obviously. So they go by stages so that they're, letting them feed in different places and then going to another place and letting them feed. So he went back to the place where he had built an altar in the past, and he called on the name of the Lord the first time since he left due to the famine. So there's some significant things happening in Abram's life, and his response is to return once again to the Lord. And I think that's like the biggest point devotionally for us here today, is Man, it doesn't matter how long it has been since you've called on the name of the Lord and how many mistakes you have made since you have been there. Just return. Just go back. Go back to the last time that the Lord met with you. Open up that journal again and find that spot where God spoke that word to you and it rocked you and it changed you. Go back to that moment and live again kind of through that moment, and then begin to cry out to the Lord based on what he did for you in that moment. That's what I'm talking about right there, because Abram, he was called out of like a pagan family. So he was not steeped in, Jewish, that didn't even exist yet, but like he wasn't steeped in all this tradition, this Judaism kind of thing. Like he was like, this was totally foreign, totally different, totally out on a limb kind of a thing. And he wasn't hitting it out of the park, He wasn't like just crushing it. And the Lord was like, wow, I'm so glad I picked Abram. No, he was a little bit of a mess. But God loved him, and he continued to meet with him, and he continued to draw him to himself. So he returns from Egypt. He goes back to the place where he had built an altar in the past and connected with the Lord, and he calls on the name of the Lord the first time since he had left due to the famine. But the land, verse 6, was unable to support them as long as they stayed together. This is again talking about Lot, for they had so many possessions that they could not stay together. And there was quarreling between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At the time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were living in the land. So Abram said to Lot, please, let's not have quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, since we are relatives. So let's have some peace, yo. God uses blessing and just the condition of the natural land to actually push Abram towards the original level of obedience he had called him to. Because he said, come up out of that place and away from your family, leave it all. And he didn't leave it all. He brought Lot with him. Now, I'm not even really here to criticize. It's just an interesting point. And so now we get to a place where the Lord had blessed both of them to such a degree that the land could not support both of them living together. So God gets out of Abram, what he originally asked him for. And it's just, again, another example of God's amazing grace to lead us where we were supposed to go in the first place, even when we didn't quite get it right. I just think, man, you got to walk away from these chapters just in awe of Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Like, we're not there yet, but that's his name, okay? And so God used the blessing and the natural land, the limitations of the natural land, to push Abram towards the original obedience when he had called him to depart the land and his family. Verse 9, isn't the whole land before you? Separate from me. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. This is Abram talking to Lot, saying, hey, man, you pick, I'll go the other way. So Lot looked out and saw the entire plain of the Jordan as far as Zoar, excuse me, as well, which was well watered everywhere, like the Lord's garden in the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord had destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose the entire plain of the Jordan for himself. Then Lot journeyed eastward, and they separated from each other. So just another interesting thing to look at in Genesis is typically when people are going east, it's actually a bad thing. It's a bad sign. It's a bad omen. It's an interesting, it's almost always a bad indicator. That it's an indicator that they're going the wrong direction, or they're choosing a life kind of apart from God. Because when Adam and Eve were out of the garden, they were going to the east. And then Cain, when he was doing his wandering, he wandered to the east. So it's just an interesting thing to note when you're reading through Genesis. Verse 12, Abram lived in the land of Canaan, but Lot lived in the cities on the plain and set up his tent near Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were evil, sinning immensely against the Lord. After Lot had separated from him, the Lord said to Abram, look from the place where you are, look north and south and east and west, for I will give you and your offspring forever all the land that you see. So Lot journeyed eastward. I already covered that part. Then that interesting remark just about the men in Sodom and Gomorrah, and just how they were living their lives, right? So the men of Sodom were evil. So sorry, not in Gomorrah, but in Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were evil, sinning immensely against the Lord. So, and that's where Lot kind of chose to go, because he was enticed by the way the land looked, that it looked so lush and fruitful and green. But, it's always an interesting, problem. Usually it's a problem when you try to make a decision based on one little indicator, one little sign and it's always like, because you're making a choice because it's going to make your life easier, So just an interesting thing how he's going eastward towards Sodom and Gomorrah. The men in Sodom are really evil, and then it mentions Zoar, which is interesting because we will find out later, when we read about Sodom and Gomorrah and the judgment upon those two cities, that's where Lot ends up going with his daughters. So because anyways, we'll get there. You just stay tuned to the Daily Devos and we will get you there and you'll learn. It'll be great. It's great stuff. Abram deferred to Lot. Lot claimed some land that God had actually promised to Abram. So this was an interesting little situation. Abram gives him the opportunity, but some of the land that he picked that he's going to live in is land that God had promised to Abram, but that's no problem for God. Not a problem for God. God is the master at overcoming our shortcomings, because we make dumb decisions and we do things that maybe we shouldn't have done. God, a lot of times, just comes in, works out the details. So in verse 16, I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust of the earth, then your offspring could be counted. Get up, walk around the land through its length and width, for I will give it to you. I just love how he's telling him to just get up and walk around the land. So just let's claim the land. Wherever the soles of her feet shall tread shall be given to you. So Abram moved his tent and went to live near the oaks of Mamre at Hebron, where he built an altar to the Lord. So again, he's kind of locked into this relationship with God piece. He's not letting it go this time. He's going to stay. So he's building an altar to the Lord and he's crying out to the Lord. So God restates the promise. And he's, again, talking about offspring. And so Abram is 75 and he doesn't have any kids. And so it's an interesting promise. Like I imagine, like Abram's like, hey, God, it's me, Abram. I mean, did you dial the wrong number? I mean, are you sure you didn't get me confused with someone else? Because I'm 75, like, help a brother out here. What's going on? Like, how is this supposed to happen now? And man, I'm kind of tired, like, are you sure you want me raising kids at this age? So God is not limited by your mistakes. He's not limited by your age. He's not limited by how your body looks or feels. He's God, and he can do anything he wants to do in you, around you, through you. It's amazing. Like, God is so good. So do not write yourself off. God's looking for a broken and contrite heart. He will not despise those things. He can use you. You just surrender to him. You make yourself available. You say, Lord, let your kingdom come and let your will be done right here in my heart. And let's go. Let's go. And God can do all the crazy things in you and through you, no matter what has gone on before. He is bigger than all that stuff. With that, I hope you are encouraged, blessed, strengthened, and I'm hoping you have an amazing day, and I will see you tomorrow.